So, you're looking for a mechanical keyboard. Sit tight and hopefully you don't get overwhelmed. I'll try my best to put as many links to things as I can. If this is your first step into the rabbit hole, I'm Rio Gion and welcome to the channel. One of the things that's important to know is that the shape. I think this is probably a better way to say it, but you might be looking for like a full size, a plus size, TKL, 60%. Those are some of the more common ones before you get into the custom built keyboards. A full-size keyboard is your standard shape where you get the number pad, and it's pretty much like most of the office keyboards that you used to type on. If you plan on using a keyboard for Excel work or have some kind of work that would require you using a number pad a lot, then I would recommend getting this layout. If you don't use a number pad, but you don't know if you need it in the future, I recommend getting it because it's better to have it than not. Also, price-wise, the keyboards with number pads tend to be cheaper, which makes no sense, but you're getting more switches, so that's how the market is. A plus-size keyboard would often include a bank of macro keys either on the left or on the top or as a detachable item depending on who makes it. If you play lots of MMO or edit lots of videos, then I would recommend going in for something like this. From experience, most of the time people I know don't use macro keys, so depending on when you're shopping for your keyboard, if you find a deal, go for it, even though you don't use it, because there might be a chance you will in the future. If you know you're not going to use it and it's going to cost a decent amount more money, then common sense say to avoid it. A TKL or 10 keyless keyboard is a compact size keyboard without the number pad, so if you know you don't use the number pad and you know that you might be paying a premium for this shape, then more power to you. I still don't know why you're paying a premium for this shape because you're paying more money and you're getting less, but that's the market, so you're just gonna have to deal with it. The main advantage of having a TKL is the size. If you have limited desk space, then the size of the keyboard would really help because it's smaller, and most of the time these keyboards come with a detachable cable, so if the cable doesn't work for you for whatsoever reason, you can just replace it with a different cable. A 60% keyboard is really small. It's often used as the main section of your typical office keyboard, so no number pad, no navigation section. I believe that's what they call it. This is something that's leaning towards the enthusiasts where you would build your own keyboard by assembling the chassis, PCB, switches, and topping it off with keycaps. I think more and more mainstream are making this kind of shape because it's getting pretty popular, so you have that going for you, which is nice. If you're someone that's interested in learning how to build your own keyboard and you want switches that are more unique, I would say go for something like this. There's two kinds. There are the ones with hot swappable. What this means is that you don't need to solder, so if you don't like to solder, then this is something that you're gonna go with. But if you like soldering, then more power to you. Takes more time, takes more effort, but the reward is well worth it. This shape is pretty expensive. They can also be budget friendly depending on how complex the build is, what chassis you want, what switches you want. So I would recommend going with this shape for someone that's more advanced, but beginners are certainly welcome as I'm sure there are a ton of tutorials, videos on YouTube for you to check them out. Okay, so this is when the fun begins. It comes to choosing your switches. There's 3 varieties and there's variances within the varieties. I don't think I'm making any sense, but you have linear, tactile, and clicky. Linear are switches that go straight down the moment you press them, so there's no bump. These are often the switch type that's preferred for people to play games more than anything. Because they're linear, they're often the fastest of the 3, so it's easier for you to double tap with them. The most obvious example is MX Red. If you want to go faster than MX Speed, which is the same as MX Red but faster, because there's a shorter spring so you activate the switch faster, then there's the optical version, which is the fastest, because there's like a laser that detects the switch from being pressed. These are often the fastest of the 3. When it comes to linear switches, I would recommend it if you're mainly playing video games with your keyboard or you believe that linear switches are the best switches for fast typing. I don't know who started this rumor, but give it a try. Make those typo, try other switches, and come back if you still want it for that reason. This variety is pretty good with enthusiasts, so if you want to build a linear switch, you can definitely find good builds. Besides the optical red and silver, there's black, which is a heavier linear switch, and then there are the enthusiast variants like Gateron Black ink, yellow ink, lubed vintage black, Helios V1 and 2 to my knowledge, Telios with a T, Telios V1 and 2, those are the enthusiast varieties, and each of those have variances that can be quoted as the best linear switches depending on who you ask. This is what a typical linear switch sounds like. Tactile switches are the middle child. These switches are quoted as best of both worlds, jack of all trade, master of none, perfect beginner switch. And there's probably one more that I didn't think about. So these switches have a bump when you press them. They're very similar to something like your regular office keyboard, but most likely better and more crisp than your office keyboard. The common color for this is brown. So MX Brown would be something that you would see in a lot of mainstream keyboards. They are both for good gaming and typing because they have a bump. It gives you more confidence when you type, and you can play games on them as well. It's pretty popular with Twitch streamer because it's not as loud as clicky. Alright, let's enter the enthusiast route. So you got Zilios, MX Clear, Gateron Brown, Gateron Ink Kangaroo, Ultemu Silent Sky Tactical, Holy Pandas, Kale Box Browns. Like, I can probably go on, but I think you get the picture. These are the most variants because of their tactile. You can change the spring so that the bump is either more pronounced or less pronounced, depending on your taste. Most enthusiasts would go with more pronounced, so they tend to make them heavier. I haven't seen or tried a tactical optical switch, so I don't know if those even exist. If they do, I would like to try them for my channel and for my own personal experience. If you're a beginner going into this guide, I'm sorry. It's a lot more complex than it should be. But go with brown, as I honestly think this is the gateway switch. And soon enough, once you're hooked, you probably have a bunch of keyboards soon enough. Like one for each day of the week or more. Probably more. Anyways, here's what a typical tactile switch sounds like. Clicky switches are tactile switches with a distinct click sound when you press them. That's because it's either a click jacket or a click bar, depending on the switch. If you shop around for budget clone Chinese keyboards, you will most likely heard or tried the switch before. This switch is basically how people tell if a keyboard is a mechanical keyboard for those normal people, I guess. People often associate clicky switch with mechanical keyboards. This is my favorite variety because I often would choose to review a clicky switch if given the chance because I love the sound. But the enthusiast community hates this switch, so you probably won't find as much variance of this variety. The color most associated is blue. So MX Blue, or my favorite, Optical Blue. Besides that, there are Kale Box Navy, MX Green, which is a heavier blue, Click Alps, NK Sherbets, Razer Kale Green, which is a softer blue, Razer Greetech Green, which is a heavier blue, similar to MX Green, MX White, which is a heavier blue, Optical Blue, which is the soft blue, and the best blue in my opinion. There's the Ultemu Blue, Blue, which is the one that you would see in most clone Chinese keyboards. Gateron Ink Blue, which is really smooth from what I heard. Also really want to try that. Personally, I started with this variety and I use brown from time to time, but I always find myself coming back to this. The sound is too good to pass up for me, so I always come back. Anyways, here's what a typical click switch sounds like. So, when it comes to the keycaps, there's a few, but from my knowledge, there's 3 that really stands out. ABS, PBT, and GMK. For O-rings, if you think your keyboard is too loud, you can use them to soften the noise and reduce the length of the travel. ABS caps are the typical keycaps that you would get buying mainstream keyboards from big name manufacturers. They're not the best keycaps, but they would collect your finger oil and they have this shine to them over time. To be honest, these keycaps are fine because it's not like they're gonna break after a short amount of use. Most people I know would just buy a mainstream keyboard, then use a keyboard until they're bored and switch it to something else, or they would use a keyboard until it dies, which I haven't seen a mechanical keyboard die yet. If you're shopping around for Chinese clone keyboards, then you would be able to see a double shot ABS keycap. So this is a mixed bag because on one end they should be better on paper because there's 2 layers of plastic instead of 1. So in theory the keycap should last longer. On the other hand, I feel like the materials they use make the ABS keycap seems cheaper and possibly might break sooner, but it's all just theory. I actually don't have any facts to prove it. PBT keycaps are better than ABS. They use a thicker plastic molding to make and they generally last longer. They don't collect oil, so they don't have that shine the ABS keycaps would have. From public opinion, they feel like they're better to press than ABS keycaps. The good thing with PBT keycap is that the mainstream manufacturers now make them, so it's either they'll sell it to you individually or they'll include them on the keyboard for the additional cost. Either way, it's nice because these are high quality keycaps. These keycaps rather sticking to the ABS keycaps. If they have double shot translucent version that's already included, and if you buy the higher end keyboard with RGB, if this is what you're shopping for, make sure to read the description for double shot so that your keyboard to make sure that you actually have those PBT double shot keycaps. I recently discovered GMK keycaps, and from what I gather, they're like the top of the line keycaps that enthusiast market is looking for. They're thicker than PBT, and the construction overall is just better than PBT, but the price is much higher than PBT. Some of those keycaps that can go for like several $100s in the top range. This is a luxury keycap set, so if you want to go fancy, then you're paying for it. Is it worth the price? This is for you to find out because, to be honest, I cannot tell you whether or not it's worth it. From research, spending time looking at websites, YouTube video, people sing praises about these keycaps and seems like most of them are happy with the purchase. Then again, if they're sponsored by the keycap maker, then they're just trying to sell your product, so take that with a grain of salt. Either way, if you want to go big, look at GMK keycaps and prepare to empty your wallet. O-rings are an add-on that has a love-hate relationship with people. They either love having O-rings on their keyboard or they hate it. Personally, I hate it. In the beginning, when I first got them, I find them because they make the key travel faster, but because the O-rings are like soft molded plastic, it makes my keyboard feel mushy, so I don't like the feeling when I type or play video games. The O-ring comes in various sizes, so your opinion may vary from mine. I didn't like mine and I didn't want to spend more money trying them out, so that's me, but for you it might be different. A last word of advice when it comes to keycaps is make sure they fit with your keyboard. Most aftermarket keycaps have a cherry cross stem, so if you use Romer G keyboards or those low profile thin switches, then chances are you're gonna have a tougher time finding keycaps in the aftermarket. If your keyboard does not have a standard bottom row, then it's gonna be hard. This is what a standard bottom row looks like, just in case you don't know. If you want RGB, then you can shop for RGB, but it varies between softwares and layers. If you want the best RGB with the most layers and effects, go with the big name manufacturers. Those guys tend to have really good RGB effects, and there's often a huge community making custom lighting profiles for you to download. So this is probably like longer of the videos that I made for the channel. I hope this helps. If you have any questions or concerns, comment down below. I'll see if I can help you. If you're looking for a recommendation, check out the description down below. I recommend reading the description and return policy before making any purchases. I got screwed buying stuff online before, so I don't want that to happen to you. If you're new, click subscribe, thumbs up, like, click the bell for more content. You guys stay awesome.